you are not abiding in Christ because there's no sin in Him. Right? And the ark is Christ. So I wonder what God's going to do here. Awesome. Psalm 91. He's going to deliver His people from sin like He promised, for one thing. The corporate fulfillment of Psalm 91 is going to happen in those 40 days. The secret place of the Most High, Psalm 90 in verse 1 tells you, Thou, Lord, Thou hast been our dwelling place. It is abiding in Christ that is the secret place of the Most High. And abiding in Christ is 1 John chapter 2 and verse 6, it is to walk as He walked. Wow, interesting. And verse 24 tells us that it is to have the same doctrine that He and the apostles had. He said, if that which you heard from the beginning abide in you, then you abide in the Son. You understand what I'm saying? There's a lot of people that are not abiding in the Son. They do not believe what the Son believed. They do not believe what the disciples believed. And we're called believers. It makes a difference what you believe, you know. And number 3, chapter 3 and verse 6 of 1 John tells us that he that abideth in the Son sinneth not. God's going to deliver His people from sin, from willful disobedience. Right? So abiding in Jesus is not something that comes automatic. We are highly motivated between here and there to learn what it is to walk in His steps and to abide in Him. Verse 3 says He's going to deliver you from the deadly pestilence. Verse 5 says He'll deliver you from the arrow that flieth by day. Sounds like the nuclear arrow, right? And for the pestilence that walketh in darkness. For the destruction that wasteth at noonday. And they'll be in the ark and they'll be watching all this going on around them. Verse 7, 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Can you imagine? That's exactly what the situation is going to be with the people of God who are abiding in Christ, and they're there during the first 40 days of this judgment upon the world. Well, how could God preserve them? Because they're in the ark. Okay? And He goes on to say, only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Astounding. They're going to be seeing the reward of the wicked with their eyes, with their physical eyes. You see that? Only with thine eyes. Verse 10, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy tent. Wow, that's interesting. Do you remember the Passover? This was the promise for the Passover. You know what? There's going to be a Passover. When the death angel destroys everybody that doesn't have the blood over their doorposts, there's going to be a Passover. And no plague will come nigh the tent of the person who's got the blood, who's walking in and out under the blood, over the doorposts, walking in, and, the Lord talked about going in and coming out, right? And talking about under the blood. So, the people that are under the blood are going to see the reward of the wicked. Isn't that awesome? This Passover is going to be exactly like the Passover in Exodus chapter 12. Because they ate the lamb, they were delivered from every plague. They had to eat the whole lamb. They had to eat the head, the inwards, and the legs. Today there are a lot of people that don't partake of the benefits of Christ because they're not eating the whole lamb. For instance, there are a lot of people who don't believe in divine healing or divine health. And of course, you don't get the part you don't believe. The part you haven't devoured does you no good, right? So, in the days that are coming, God's people are going to learn through 7 days of unleavened bread. I'll share that with you too. What it is to abide in Christ. And they're going to be empowered by the latter rain to learn to abide in Christ. And the Passover is going to happen because the death angel is going to pass over the righteous and destroy all the wicked. How could God protect His people while they're out there watching a nuclear war going on? Especially one where they're attacking America, for instance. I mean, you and I are involved in that. How could God protect His people for 40 days of that? Because the sun and the moon are darkened. Well, look at the next verse here. Verse 11. He will give His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. You couldn't even have an accident when the angels are in charge, right? And protecting you, right? Isn't that awesome? The Passover and Psalm 91 are going to be fulfilled at that time. Look at Joshua chapter 6. Here's a very neat little type and shadow that's hidden in here for us to look at. That gives us all the timings. Okay? Now you remember when Joshua had entered into the promised land. The manna had ceased. The manna was the unleavened bread that they received in the wilderness. It represented partaking of Christ, eating Christ, right? He is the bread that came down out of heaven that gives life to the world. And we certainly need to devour Him to get prepared for a Passover that's coming. Okay? Devour His head, which is the mind of Christ, and His inwards, which is the heart of Christ, and His legs, which is the walk of Christ. We need to partake of all of Christ in order to be passed over. And that's going to happen because the tribulation is going to be a time when God's going to teach His people how to abide in Him. Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. You know, Jericho was the first city of the Promised Land. What's the first city of the Promised Land? It's Zion. The New Jerusalem is the first city of the Promised Land. Okay? I want you to see that here as a type. See Zion, because now they're entering into the Promised Land of the first city. Verse 2, And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thy hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And you shall compass the city, all the men of war, going about the city once. And thou shalt do this 6 days. Well, these are prophetic days. You know, no one's entered yet, and we've been going for 6,000 years, right? Okay. So, verse 4. So after 6,000 years, okay, something's going to happen. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark. That's the 7 trumps of the book of Revelation, right? And we know that the 7th trump is the last trump, right? So 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark. And the 7th day, which we just entered the 7th day, didn't we? No matter, most everybody calculates it within 2 or 3 years anyway. We've just entered the 7th day. The 7th 1,000 years from the beginning, right? And you shall compass the city 7 times. Now times, if you read in the book of Revelation, you know, for instance, Revelation chapter 12, it tells us 3.5 years is time, times, and a half a time. That's 3.5. Times represents years. Okay? So see that as years. So on the 7th day, after 6 days, on the 7th day, there are 7 trumps, and they compass the city 7 times. That's 7 years. They don't enter, they just compass it. And the priest shall blow the trumpets. What happens after the last trump? The people of God are ready to go, right? They're ready to enter into their promised land, right? And it shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout. Do you remember what happened in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 16? There was a shout in the trump of God in 1 Corinthians 15, 51, 52 at the last trump, right? And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall go up. I circled that in my Bible. Go up. Every man straightway before him. In other words, wherever you are in relationship to the city, you will go straight up into the city. See? Now, you see the type we got here? It doesn't fit a pre-tribulation rapture, does it? At all. First of all, it's after the last trump.